Hello, my name is William Mercure, and today I am presenting on how cultural bias relates to the 5 cultural identities as described in Chapter 3.4 of our text. Cultural bias occurs when we negatively refer to a group or an individual based on some characteristic or belief. Biased language usually is related to stereotypes or myths, which makes them inaccurate. Sometimes we use this language unintentionally based on the influence of our culture or our society. Other times we use these words other intentionally in order to convey a negative meaning. Regardless, they are hurtful and they are unappreciated. Language is a powerful tool, and we need to be more aware about the impact of our words. Culturally biased language can make reference to one or more cultural identities, including race, gender, age, sexual orientation, or ability. Using cultural bias in regard to race is different from discrimination. Bias is not hate. Cultural bias towards race refers to the tendency to interpret and judge individuals from different racial backgrounds based on the norms, values, and assumptions of one's culture, often the dominant culture, leading to an unfair advantage or disadvantage. Race-related cultural bias can be intentional or unintentional, but is always reinforcing racial stereotypes. An example of racial cultural bias can look something like this. A black student uses excessive gestures when answering a question. The teacher, coming from a different racial background, can interpret this as disruptive and label the student as a behavior problem, while a white student displaying similar enthusiasm could be praised for their actions. It is better to not use terms such as non-white, but rather people of color when speaking. The way we speak, interpret, and respond to language can either reinforce or reduce cultural bias. Language can amplify stereotypical differences between men and women, and that is referred to as gender cultural bias. The use of the term opposite sex presumes that men and women are not capable equals, which is obviously not true, or they wouldn't have successful relationships. An example of gender bias might look something like this. A teacher might praise and encourage boys more than girls on subjects like math or science because they're naturally good, where the same teacher might tell a girl, "You're more creative, you might like English better." The teacher made an assumption based on the gender of the student, and our text suggests that we avoid the usage of pronouns like he and she and rather use they or theirs, as not to exclude or assume either gender in reference to the topic that we are discussing. The object is to never assume one's gender is superior to the other. Age is the third of 5 identities of cultural bias. Age-related cultural bias refers to the tendency to treat people unfairly based on stereotypes tied to their age. This bias can affect both older and younger individuals and shows what people think others should do based on their age. It reflects a bias that younger people lack experience and credibility, and that older people are too old for the job because they aren't capable. It also assumes that older people have better judgment based on experience, perhaps, than younger people that are too tied to technology and social networking. An example of bias might look something like this. A business meeting is going on and a younger individual or employee suggests that they use a new social media marketing strategy to target more people, and all the older ones dismiss it because they've always done it a different way that's always worked. Age-related bias assumes one age is superior to the other in a given situation. Sexual orientation cultural bias is the unfair treatment, assumptions, or judgments made about a person based on their sexual orientation. It leads to exclusion based on who someone loves or is attracted to. Language regarding romantic relationships contains bias when heterosexuality is assumed the normal because any other romantic relationship outside the traditional union has a label or description. To make it worse, sometimes people presume others' sexual orientation based on their appearance. Some might say those jeans look gay, or that girl is dressed like a man, so she must be a lesbian. Don't presume you can identify a person's sexual orientation by looking at them or talking to them. Using gender-neutral terminology like partner and avoiding other biased language may create a climate in which a person feels comfortable disclosing his or her sexual orientation identity. An example of this might be a high school yearbook includes the cutest couple category in the senior superlatives, but only boy-girl pairs are allowed to enter, when a lesbian pair might want to enter but told it's just the tradition to keep the category male and female. As a side note, our text does mention individuals are not allowed to marry someone of the same gender in most states of the United States. I'd like to point out, as of 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court ruling has made all same-sex marriages legal in all 50 states across the United States, which is a major leap in diminishing sexual orientation cultural bias. Bias based on ability refers to the unfair treatment, assumptions, or stereotypes directed at individuals based on their physical, cognitive, or developmental abilities, shaped by the dominant culture's idea of what is normal. This is where normal is superior, and that people with disabilities are abnormal. Just because someone is disabled does not mean he or she is also handicapped. Language often used when referring to those with disabilities can portray people as victims of their disability and paint pictures of their lives as unfortunate and less fulfilling as those who are fully able. Such descriptors are often generalizations or completely inaccurate. Disabled individuals share the same human rights, dignity, and worth as everyone else. Their value is not based on physical strength, mobility, or how fast their brain processes information. It is based on the fact that they are human and that any assumptions otherwise is a bias. When you call someone retarded or slow, you are actually insulting an entire group of people who are able and intelligent. A disability is not abnormal. A person with disability is only disable according to their environment. The Americans with Disabilities Act, which was established in 1990, prohibits discrimination, and language should be avoided that implies that they are less worthy or less able. I learned that cultural bias happens when people make the unfair assumptions about others based on their race, gender, age, ability, and other differences. I also realized that cultural bias isn't always intentional. It can show up in everyday things without people even being aware of it. Being aware of it is the first step toward treating everyone with respect and fairness because it is hurtful to those on the receiving end. In regards to cultural bias towards ability, I learned that the ADA protects individuals in everyday life towards equal rights. Employers can't discriminate and accommodations must be made in businesses, schools, and public buildings. This makes sure that disabled people aren't excluded from public life and have multiple opportunities. Now that I've become more aware of cultural bias, I'm wondering how many times I've been a victim of this myself. Although I don't meet the criteria for some of the categories discussed, I know that there is a chance that people have shown wrongful bias towards me and some of my characteristics or my abilities. This is an insight that I haven't considered before. Perhaps people have heard me speak or assume that I'm a stupid hillbilly based on my southern accent. I have heard jokes made about people from the state of Georgia, especially Alabama, because that's where my family is from, in which they assume that they are less intelligent and poor based on the way we talk or the words that we use. It would be a cultural bias to refer to me or my family as people from the Deep South, and inferring that we are less educated or lacking in knowledge or technological advancement. Perhaps people have seen me and assume that I'm not capable of performing a task because of my age, although they do not know my abilities or specific training for that task. I believe that there are many more cultural biases than our text discusses, and some might even be more pronounced than the ones I've already discussed in this report. To avoid contributing to cultural bias towards others, I can treat people as the humans that they are with the same rights, dignity, and value as everybody else. I can watch my words and I can make sure I'm not making assumptions or offensive, discriminatory statements. I should always avoid stereotypes about race, gender, age, sexual orientation, or ability as not to offend other people. I need to ask myself, am I using language that assumes everyone is the same as me? Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope my presentation of information was clear, complete, and thorough.